For decades, the United States has alternated between confrontation and collaboration, frequently applying unfounded, countervailing and anti-dumping duties against Canadian softwood. Let's be clear. Canada does not dump lumber into the United States.
On July 31, 2025, the White House announced that President Trump was raising U.S. tariffs on Canadian goods from 25% to 35%, effective August 1st. Reuters. This aggressive move, which includes lumber among the affected goods, instantly reverberated through trade markets, housing forecasts, and diplomatic channels. Most people don't think daily about lumber until they see their mortgage costs jump or a rebuilding project stall. Yet lumber is now central to a trade war poised to hit American families, Canadian timber workers, and housing markets across North America. Canada, which supplies a significant share of U.S. softwood lumber, is responding with large financial support packages and strategic countermeasures. One such measure, Canada plans to provide $1.2 billion Canadian dollars to shield its lumber industry from U.S. countervailing and anti-dumping duties. In this video, we'll break down what the tariff increase really means for U.S. housing costs, how Canada is reacting, and whether it can withstand the blow, and who's likely to win or lose in this escalating showdown. If you're new here, hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss any updates. These trade fights impact everyone. Let's start with the foundation, the U.S.-Canada lumber trade. For decades, Canada has been one of the key suppliers of softwood lumber to the U.S., helping fuel housing construction, furniture manufacturing, and disaster recovery projects. The tariff leap to 35% is not just punitive, it's transformational. U.S. industry insiders and analysts warn that American mills and sawyers cannot, in the short term, ramp up capacity enough to fill the gap. Canada benefits from a long-established infrastructure, provincial forest allocations, and a skilled labor base. At the same time, international trade rules complicate the picture. Many goods still qualify under USMCA exemptions, protecting them from the full impact of new duties. AP News. That means even with a 35% tariff headline, not all Canadian exports are treated equally. The risk is real. Higher lumber costs feed into every layer of construction: framing, roofing, sidings, cabinetry. For homeowners, it means delayed projects, stretched budgets, and fewer affordable housing options. But Canada isn't passive. The government, under Prime Minister Mark Carney, quickly announced emergency aid for the lumber sector. The support, as per Reuters, includes 700 million Canadian dollars in loan guarantees plus 500 million Canadian dollars for diversification and innovation. Canada is also exploring export limits, quotas on softwood lumber. In its talks with the U.S., British Columbia's Premier David Eby stated that Canada is open to considering limits to ease trade friction. So the battle lines are drawn. On one side, a tariff-driven push by the U.S. On the other, a calm but resourceful Canadian counter-response. The most immediate and visible effects land squarely in the U.S. housing sector: rising building costs. Analysts estimate that construction costs could rise by 10 to 15% because lumber is a core component of component supply chains. Increased material costs translate directly into higher bills for homeowners. Projects already underway are being rebudgeted or delayed. In states accustomed to wildfire cycles like California, families still rebuilding from past disasters now face a steeper climb. Delayed projects and financing pain. Because lumber is a bulk purchase in home building, many developers must renegotiate contracts, delay timelines, or absorb cost overruns. This uncertainty discourages investment in new housing starts. Mortgage affordability is already stressed under high-interest regimes. Now add increased material costs, and many prospective buyers are priced out. Broken promises. President Trump has previously pitched himself as pro-housing growth, but a tariff policy that inflates building costs works at cross purposes with that objective. The administration says it's protecting U.S. timber jobs, but the burden may land elsewhere, on homeowners, renters, and real estate developers. The key takeaway: tariffs may win headlines, but the costs are often invisible until your home renovation or mortgage payment shows up. Canada's response has been swift and multifaceted: financial support and stabilization. And to protect its lumber industry from U.S. countervailing and anti-dumping duties, Ottawa announced up to 1.2 billion Canadian dollars in support. 700 million Canadian dollars is allocated for loan guarantees to help businesses with cash flow challenges. 500 million Canadian dollars goes toward product development, innovation, and market diversification strategies. Pivot to domestic housing demand. Rather than allowing lumber inventory to sit idle, Canada is pushing to match it with internal housing development. That means using the timber for affordable homes within Canada, keeping the value chain domestic instead of exporting everything. Export limits and quotas. In a policy shift, Canada is now considering limits on softwood lumber exports to the U.S. British Columbia. Premier David Eby confirmed that quotas may be part of the negotiation. Reuters. This move gives Canada a new bargaining chip, if carefully wielded, to temper the leverage U.S. tariffs attempt to exploit. Retaliatory tariff rollbacks. In a gesture to reset talks, Canada also announced it would remove many of its retaliatory import tariffs on U.S. goods in sectors covered by USMCA, signaling a softening posture intended to re-engage the U.S. diplomatically. Reuters, the strategy is dual: defend Canadian timber interests while reopening negotiation channels. Just when the narrative seemed purely economic, the plot thickened. Hours before the August tariff deadline, President Trump raised a new plank, linking trade talks to Canada's stance on Palestine in a social media post.
Prime Minister Mark Carney announcing Canada has officially recognized the state of Palestine.
This injected a foreign policy dimension into trade negotiations, shifting the battlefield. A former provincial leader called it deliberate chaos, deliberately introducing unpredictable elements so opponents stay off balance. For Canada, it's a warning. Even concessions on lumber may not satisfy Washington's shifting demands. Ottawa's approach? Stay grounded in discipline, avoid reactionary decisions, and keep trade talks on Canada's timeline. The rules changed mid-game. That's trading in 2025. August 1st was the tipping point. The 35% tariff went into effect, but the reality is more nuanced. Key exemptions. Because of USMCA compliance, many Canadian goods, particularly energy exports, remain exempt. According to AP News, nearly all Canadian energy exports and about 95% of other goods continue to enter duty-free. AP News that limits how broadly the tariffs can disrupt trade. Symbolic versus real impact. Some sectors hit are more symbolic than economic blow. For example, tariffs on copper pipes or semi-finished copper materials might look tough, but Canada primarily exports cathodes and concentrates, which are exempt from duties. The headlines appear more severe than effects. Canada quietly shifted trade flows to minimize damage. Beyond lumber, Canada is positioning for future resilience. Bill C-5 introduced efforts to reduce domestic trade barriers, strengthening the internal market. Investment is flowing into infrastructure, energy, and innovation sectors. Canada is deepening trade ties with Mexico, the EU, and G7 nations, reducing overdependence on the U.S. Provinces are coordinating strategically. British Columbia presses softwood leverage. Ontario focuses on protecting the auto industry. Quebec demands transparency in trade negotiations. The unity is uncommon, but necessary in a crisis. The paradox of this trade war is clear. The stronger the U.S. push, the more Canada steels itself. American homebuyers, developers, and builders feel the pain. Inflated material costs, project delays, squeezed margins. Yet Canada, with its strategic support and disciplined response, may emerge not just responsive but transformed. Trump may claim political bravado, but analysts wonder, did he play his strongest card too soon? Without hitting energy or supply chain choke points, the economic pressure remains diffuse. As one analyst said, this conflict is not just about timber. It's a test of long-term strategy, resilience, and who controls the narrative. So I leave you with this question. Has Trump already used his strongest move, and now Canada holds the strategic advantage? If you found this analysis valuable, please subscribe, like, and share. Drop a comment. I'll pin the best one.